give us your answers anyway. Nathen, welcome.
Hey,
Could you share,
welcome.
for those of you who might not have met you before, just a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
For sure. Hi, I'm Nathen Harvey. I lead up DORA, which is maybe you've heard of DORA before. It's a research program that's, we live within inside of Google Cloud. The research itself is program and platform agnostic, but it's all about how do teams get better at delivering on operating software. And we look at important things that matter, like the well-being of people on the team, the organizational outcomes that we're driving, things like market share and customer satisfaction and so forth. And we look at the capabilities that actually drive that so that we can help teams get on a journey of continuous improvement, or as I like to say, we can help teams get better at getting better.
I like that. I say that quite often now, probably once a day at least, get better at
Nice.
getting better. Well, thanks, Nathen, for joining me. If you are joining and you don't know who I am, I'm Laura Tacho. I'm the CTO at DX. We are a developer experience company. We help teams measure and improve developer productivity and developer experience. And I'm so glad that Nathen is joining me today. Nathen and I have had lots of very interesting conversations, which kind of just is, it's nice to have these conversations with an audience, quite honestly. But we often talk about things that drive developer experience, developer productivity. And one of the things that came out during one of our previous conversations was we were talking about GenAI tools. And I had noticed that, surprising to me, in the 2023 State of DevOps report, which DORA
Mhm.
puts out, I noticed that for teams that were using generative AI tools like Copilot, for example, actually what DORA found was that there was not an increase in performance in certain circumstances. This is really different from a lot of the research that we see around Copilot adoption and impact on teams. And we got into a little bit about why that might be, but we thought it would be an interesting conversation to have with all of you. So maybe to start, Nathen, why do you think that is? I know we talked about it a little bit, but I think the audience would be really
Yeah,
interested to learn more
yeah,
about it.
absolutely. So let me just kind of take us back in time a moment here.
Yeah.
So the way that the DORA research works is each year we do an annual survey. In fact, that annual survey for 2024, it's open right now. So if you go over to dora.dev/survey, you can participate in the survey. So let's go back a full year. Around this time in 2023, of course, there were lots of Gen AI tools that were coming on the market, lots of hype, maybe not a whole lot of people that had experience with them yet. And last year, that was our big question. Are you using AI? And in what ways are you using it? Are you using it to write code? Are you using it to manage data? Are you using it to troubleshoot issues in production? And we had, I don't know, a list of 30 or so different things where you might be using it. And we asked more than just, are you using it, but how important is it to you? Like to the actual day-to-day
Hmm.
work? Is it extremely important or maybe mildly important? Who knows? And what we found was that there was, as we looked across our survey set, our sample set, which is from organizations around the world of every shape and size, what we saw was there were a good number of people that were using AI somewhere.
Hmm.
But we didn't see any real impacts flowing through to things like organizational performance. It didn't really change organizational performance. The place where we saw the most impact was actually on the well-being of people on the teams that were using AI. And even then, it was a pretty small uplift of well-being. But my theory there, what I guess is, look, if I'm able to play with the new tools and new toys that are made available to me, Gen AI being one of those, I'm likely to be more engaged in the work that I'm doing. Maybe that
Hmm.
helps reduce burnout, but I have higher job satisfaction because I have the autonomy maybe to play with this new technology, see what it's like, experiment. And you've used chat GPTs and so forth. They're fun. They're fun to play with.
It is
So
fun.
I can see why that might improve job satisfaction. And in terms of like not really driving or predicting better organizational performance or even better software delivery performance, uh, I think the answer is not yet. And I think
Hmm.
that, a year ago, we were still very new. I think today, we're all still very new in trying to figure out what are the best use cases for generative AI during our software delivery lifecycle.
Yeah. I guess an interesting question, I think a leadership philosophy question is that if there's a tool that makes the lives of your developers easier, improves their well-being, decreases burnout, like is that in and of itself an organizational performance boost, and like, would you still invest in it? Because how does DORA quantify organizational performance in this context?
Yeah, the way that we look at organizational performance is that we ask our participants to the extent to which their organization has met its profitability goals,
Mm-hmm.
like increased its market share, in a delivered on its mission and goals, has high customer satisfaction. Characteristics like this that, shipping a single line of code isn't going to fix any of those things, but continuing to deliver software can have an impact on all of those things. So we look
Yeah.
at that, and then we also look at, as I mentioned, well-being, which is kind of a combination of burnout, job satisfaction, team performance, things like that.
Yeah. Are you changing the way that you are measuring AI for 2024? Because this is it's like
Yes,
such a rapidly evolving area that, part of the
absolutely.
thing we talked about was like the survey for 2023 closed in August, right? August of
Yeah,
2023, or like,
July
so
or
let's just
August.
say
Yep.
a year ago.
Yeah,
That's a long time. That's a long time ago in AI years,
it,
right?
it is a long
Um,
time.
and so looking ahead to the survey for this next year, like what kinds of things are you asking about? How, like, what's the methodology behind capturing
Yeah,
that?
we're certainly going deeper than how valuable is AI to you in these particular tasks. We
Mm-hmm.
were also asking things like, what surfaces of AI are you interacting with? Are you interacting with AI in your interactive development environment, your IDE? Are you interacting with it maybe on a website? Things like that. And there's a bunch of other questions that we have around AI. I'm just pulling up some of them. Give me 1 second here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
I have them. I
Oh,
have them here as well.
you have them. Yeah, great.
Yeah. How much the participant has relied on AI for the last 3 months, which surfaces.
Yes.
Let's see. Impact of AI
Yes.
on overall code quality, impact of AI on participants' ability to write code.
Right.
Um, these are all like perceptive metric questions, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Within DORA, like it's a survey-based methodology for us to collect the data. So
Mm-hmm.
they're all most of our questions are exactly that perception. How do you, what's your belief that AI has
Mm-hmm.
improved organizational performance? Do you feel that it has? What's its impact on your productivity, and other employees around you? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions I like to ask is, if you had to pay for Copilot with your own money, would you do it?
Right.
And often developers say absolutely,
Uh-huh.
because I feel like there's a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but like there's some disconnect. Maybe it's the way we've been measuring it or thinking about measuring it. Um, but it really does, it reduces cognitive load so extremely. And like, I mean, we can think about other examples from our own lives where looking at a blank piece of paper is very daunting and it's very difficult to get started. But if you're looking at something that, um, something generated by ChatGPT just as something to start from, it's a lot easier to edit than it is to generate new things. And a lot of
Absolutely.
developers I talk with use Copilot that way, not as a way to, like, they're not expecting it to like magically do their job for them. We're not necessarily at that point yet, but just as a way to reduce the cognitive load and feel less responsible for remembering everything, that they know that they have something there that's going to assist them.
Absolutely. I was just working on some updates to Dora.dev, and I was lamenting the fact that we actually don't have a whole lot of tests built into Dora.dev. It's a static website after all, but we should probably have some tests to validate some things over time. And so one of the frameworks that I came across was Playwright, and I had no experience with Playwright, but it will, pull up a web page and validate things that are there that you might expect to see on the web page and things like
Yeah.
that. And it's very code driven. And so I asked, I don't use Copilot, I use Gemini, Google Cloud's Gemini Code Assist. And I asked the Code Assist in the chat, like, hey, can you write some Playwright tests for me for this particular page? And it not only wrote the test, but it also gave me a lot of reasoning about how it was creating the tests, and it gave me information about Playwright. And I ran into an issue that, I wanted to do something quite a little bit different to
Mm-hmm.
what it had generated. And so I asked it, well, how do I do this in Playwright? And then it gave me more context and more code that I could just inject right into the thing. So using it as a learning tool I think is really, really powerful as well. And I stayed right there in my code editor. That was really, really nice.
Yeah, I think we started applying AI to coding tasks.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not surprising why. I mean, that's where we spend a lot of our we meaning the royal we developers,
Right.
where we spend our time and where the optimization was obvious. But I think the coding task is actually just such a small part of software development and software delivery. And as you said, like applying AI to the problems around the coding task is probably where we're going to see more efficiency gains in the future.
Yes. Yeah. I think so. I think that, look, generating code and writing code, it can definitely help with that. And I think that it can help people that are new to industry get going a little bit faster. I think it can help
Hmm.
seniors, like really experienced developers, maybe can ask the chats better questions and therefore generate better code. But even at the end of the day, like if we eliminated all of the time it took us to write the code, like you said, that's a relatively small portion of what does it take to actually ship value out to your customers.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of other tasks along that. And frankly, a lot of other friction along that path that I think AI can really help us with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of stuff that AI can help us with. I would love, because there's so many conversations about that, for us just to spend a little bit of time on maybe indulging the skeptics in the room and indulging the skeptical side of ourselves. One thing I noticed was, and I think this has been shown in quite a few different studies, was AI, Copilot, Gemini, whatever tool it is, can be very helpful for short-term efficiency gains, but we don't
Mhm.
actually know a lot about long-term efficiency gains. And in a couple studies, at least, it showed that the code is maybe a little bit harder to understand and harder to maintain. How do you recommend or how do you envision that leaders can keep an eye on that to make sure that they're not just only laser focusing in on the short-term efficiency gains and losing sight of degrading quality and degrading maintainability across their code bases and
Yeah.
platforms?
I think that's a really good point. I think you can stay very focused on we're going to make our developers more efficient, and that actually doesn't make the entire system better. And you can also lose sight, as you said, over that timeline as we're writing code. I mean, eh, I've written code that was pushed into production over a decade ago. Some of that code is still there. I don't even work at the company anymore where I was then. And so code has a very long shelf life. And this is both amazing and scary. And
Hmm.
so we really need to look out for that code maintainability. And maybe if the bots wrote the code and it's hard to understand, at least the bots can understand it so they can come along and maintain it. And I think at the end of the day, we still need to understand what's happening in that code, what's actually going on. And I think this is just a good reminder that even the code that's written by the bots, it might not do what you expect it to do. So we
Hmm.
can't throw out all of the feedback mechanisms that we've built in. We still need to, as an industry, kind of focus in on smaller changes and higher fidelity, faster feedback on what is the impact of those changes.
Yeah. I sometimes think about it as like dishwasher, like bear with me.
All
I think
right.
there's a lot of some people that like put dishes in the dishwasher and like if the dishwasher says clean, then they just put them away. And then there's other people who like look at the dish look at the dishes when it's coming out of the dishwasher and be like, it didn't get clean. I need to clean it again. And I think that like represents this division of responsibility so well
Mm.
because we can't just trust that everything that comes out of the dishwasher is totally clean and put it away. And like, there still needs to be verification. You still need to be responsible for the results. And we can't
Right.
remove humans completely from coding activities because we have AI. So I think there's a lot of like, oh, is the next $1 billion startup going to be a one-person startup because now we have AI who's going to do everything for us? And like, I think we're still a very long way from that being a reality.
Mhm.
I mean, I could definitely see in a couple like years, not a year, but like years that teams can operate way leaner because the coding part is almost like a commodity now.
Right.
It's almost like, we used to employ a lot of people to like provision infrastructure and now we can just click buttons somewhere. And like maybe that's really where AI is taking us. That code is really a commodity in the future.
Yeah,
Maybe that's dismal.
maybe, but I think there's a piece to that also where we really need to think about our specialties, and I think the specialists are never going to go away, and in fact, they're going to become even more important. I was at DevOps Days Kansas City recently, and I was talking about some of the DORA research findings, and one of the key findings that we've been really looking at over the last 3 years is the power of documentation, internal documentation, how it really amplifies all of the technical capabilities that you have, and it makes those technical capabilities have a bigger impact on organizational performance. In fact, it's so much so that we have this saying around DORA: documentation is like sunshine. So thinking about those plants behind you, you can water them, but if they don't get sunshine, they'll probably fail to thrive. You need kind of both. So documentation is like sunshine. After the talk, someone asked, well, hey, we've got all this AI. AI is really good at writing docs. Are we going to lose our tech writers? And to me, like, there was so much unintentional, like, hubris in that question. This person was clearly not a tech writer, but looked at, what do tech writers do? I look at it from afar, and I could do that, or a bot could do that. And they kind of dismissed the skill set of the tech writers in order to really understand how to bring that documentation to life and how to really make it be impactful. And so I think it's really important that we remember that, yes, maybe the bots, maybe the AI can help those tech writers get more efficient and at they're writing, but it's a long time before it's going to be able to replace them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of areas that are non-coding that are so challenging, but then when you don't have, it's like a, Dunning-Kruger, like
Yes.
you think that you know because you actually don't know anything at all. Documentation is incredibly difficult. And so I think that's actually maybe another sort of subheading in this conversation of when can AI be hurtful to teams, which is when we don't take into consideration the specialty and can say, oh, well, we're not going to hire a docs writer, or we're not going to invest in XYZ because we feel that AI can do it for us, without actually knowing the skill and being able to evaluate whether it's doing a good job. I think that's really the underline here, is that even when you are using a tool like Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever it is, you need someone who's skilled to verify that the result is what you want and what's intended. And so we can't just like spray the robots and expect them to do everything perfectly.
Absolutely. The AI, look, they're really, really great and powerful, and we have to still exercise care. They give us very confident answers. Sometimes those confident answers are wrong, or
complete
are not quite
hallucinations.
right. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, Benjamin, you said it best: trust but verify.
There it is.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, in everything, trust but verify. So great. Nathen, you had a few good things to say in our previous conversations about, like, not losing sight of why teams are bringing AI into their teams. And so what are some of the biggest reasons that a team might want to bring AI into their workflow?
Look, the biggest reason to bring AI into your workflow is because AI, and everyone is AI today, Laura. And so more AI. And if we AI, it'll be more AI, and that will be better, right?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. What else do you need? Of course, look, AI is super fun. It's great to play with. It's fun to experiment with, but it is important not to lose sight of why, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we building this application? Why are we adding this new feature? It's for our customers, and it's to help our customers. And so really thinking about, look, we want to help our customers. Maybe the AI can help us summarize customer feedback and make plans based on that. So that's a big opportunity there. But we want to help customers by shipping more software and shipping that software faster and safer, and it's better software. And that's why we're using AI. And that's why I think it's so important that we have sort of guardrails in place that can tell us, how are we doing before we started using AI? And what is the impact of AI over time? Are we, in fact, able to ship software safer? Are we able to ship it faster? Are we able to meet
Mhm.
customer demand easier? So we should see, as we improve our use of AI, we should see our software delivery performance metrics improving. We should see our organizational metrics improving, our well-being metrics improving. If we aren't seeing that, that's a good signal that we need to take some different actions. I don't know what those actions are.
Mhm.
It depends on the details of the signals, but not losing sight of that, I think, is really important.
Yeah. It just reminds me, like, I mean, everything old is new again, right? And I feel like we, as an industry, go through these sort of obsessive phases with new technology, like whatever it might have been blockchain a few years ago. But like, I can still remember when, I mean, people used to talk about the internet like this. I mean, maybe not in in the same context, but making sure that we're using things purposefully and intentionally and not just doing things for the sake of doing them.
Right.
Which I think especially it's just very hard not to get distracted by the shiny thing. But I think about, and I've talked to several leaders and teams who are, they've just felt like they've wasted a lot of time um,
Mm.
experimenting with stuff that actually didn't end up helping. So I think there's like one thing about using generative AI tools to help your teams become more efficient. I think there's a whole other category of problems of like, how can I slap on some AI into my product to try to build something that is hopefully going to turn into more money? And that's actually the area where I see people really wasting time and getting really distracted about what AI can be used for in a
Mhm.
useful way. Maybe I'll just put it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of learning to be done there. I think that there's a lot of cool advances with, tools that are being built, with chatbots that are being built, and so forth. And frankly, as consumers of that, we don't, we're still building the muscle to interact with those,
Hmm.
right? And so I don't think every consumer who goes to any retail site today just wants to start with a chatbot experience, right?
Hmm.
Regardless of how good that chatbot is. But it can certainly be it can certainly be additive to the overall experience. At the same time, it could be frustrating to the overall
Hmm.
experience. I mean, we all also work with interactive voice response. When we call up our airline and have to navigate the menus or
Oh
whatever, that can
man.
be super frustrating, right?
That is super frustrating. That is super frustrating. Yeah, yeah, not everyone wants a chatbot.
Yeah.
Benjamin had a great question. I'd like to know what the cost differences between between AI to build a piece of code as compared to cost for a developer building the same quality code. And I think this is an
Mhm.
interesting thing because it gets into the next topic I wanted to get into, which is use cases and populations that are most helped by AI and types of projects that are most helped by AI. Um, so I think we found and actually I'm curious what the 2024 survey is going to show, but generally junior developers or developers earlier in their career or developers who are working on a totally new platform, language, framework,
Yes.
whatever, benefit most because the most efficiency gains are for people that have the least amount of knowledge. So it accelerates the on ramp onboarding
Mhm.
into a new
Mhm.
code base or a new language framework. But then after that, we see things not totally flatten out, but it's just not as impactful for a senior specialist type of developer than it
Mm.
is for like a junior generalist.
Right.
Um, and so, Benjamin, I don't know how I would answer that question, but I think we would have to look at what kind of job and what kind of team would build it versus like, could you build it with a more junior team that's less expensive? How much time would it take? But then also, how much does it cost to pay for the tool and like do some spreadsheets? I don't know, Nathan, how would you think about answering that question? You muted yourself again. Still
Mm.
muted.
And
Nope.
now Ben is spot on. We have to think about the financial implications of what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, it, without like some pretty rigorous A/B testing of teams in your organization, I think it's going to be hard to tie the financial impact of just this AI tool and the use of it down to the dollar cost difference. So I think it's hard. I think that you want to
Hmm.
look at sort of the team level outcomes or the application level outcomes. In fact, in DORA, we have an ROI report that we published. You can find that at dora.dev/publications down at the bottom, other publications. But it has some financial formulas that you might use for what is the cost of delaying shipping software? What's the benefit of shipping more frequently? And really the underlying thesis is that look, when we ship, we get to learn new things about how our customers interact with our software. And so if we only ship twice a year, we only get 2 chances to learn and get new feedback. If we ship 24 times a year, that's 22 additional learning opportunities across the year. So the idea of moving faster can have a real financial benefit for us in terms of making sure that we're meeting our customers' demand and lining up with them. So I think that's a really important consideration.
Yeah. I wonder also though, like what's the long-term like talent acquisition and attrition cost if you choose not to use GenAI tooling and it's something that developers want to use? Like,
Yeah, I
would I
mean,
not work at your company because you choose not to use
it,
uh
yeah,
those
I think
tools?
this is another thing that we're looking at. What are the policies around using AI? And we're seeing,
Mm-hmm.
we're also new. We're also new to this, that there are, some places that have no policies against it, some places that have very strict policies for controlling the use of AI within their organizations. And that absolutely could have an impact on where you get to work. Imagine getting a software engineering job and you walk in and on the first day they say, oh, we don't believe in version control here, so we don't use that and you are not allowed to.
Bye.
Yeah, I don't think you could stick around. Now, AI
Yeah.
today is not at that level, but in the future, certainly I can see it getting there.
Well, I think we can, we're both like not spring chickens anymore, right? We've been in the industry a while. But like, I mean, I remember working at jobs where like we didn't use Git or
Uh-huh.
GitHub. We
Huh?
didn't do automated testing. Like we didn't do a lot of these things. We were, this like whole DevOps transformation is something that it's like relatively recent and like there's plenty of coding work that was done before. But I remember like in those periods when I would be looking for a different job, I would definitely ask about those things. Like, are you using,
Yeah.
a big one was like, are you using a SaaS CI/CD tool or are you using Jenkins? And like for me, I just, I had my own preferences. But I would never, I think there's a lot of developers that work at companies that don't use GitHub. I'll say that. But I think
Hmm.
given the choice, I think a lot of developers would choose not to work at companies that didn't use their preferred tool set.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I
And so it costs
yeah,
a lot
and
of money to hire developers. And if you want to stay competitive for talent, that's how, that's part of the equation as well.
But that also goes back to one of the things that you were just talking about earlier about like a junior developer coming onto a project or even a senior developer coming onto a new project. With AI in place, you can really get up to speed on that code base very quickly, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And as sort of the number of tokens that you have, it improves and continues to increase as we as an industry continue to experiment with RAG and figuring out more ways to have more of the code base in context. I think we're going to see some really interesting things there where people are able to very quickly come up to speed on an existing code base, start making meaningful contributions to that code base very, very quickly. And what does
Yeah.
that mean for things like legacy code or code or applications that aren't using sort of modern practices? Is the AI going to help us inject more modern practices into some of those applications? I think it remains to be seen. And this is kind of the beauty of where we are today. There's so much experimentation that's right in front of us. And this is what I'm encouraging teams to do is just experiment, figure out what are how are you going to measure the impact, and then do some things to have to sort of change those measurements.
Nathan, do you think that in the future it's just going to be AI maintaining COBOL applications?
It might be.
It
It
might
might
be.
be.
I was just talking to someone today who was like, "Oh man," and then there's like this team had to figure out like how like COBOL in general, and I was like, "Man, that actually seems like a good use case for AI." Like, if I had to approach that problem, I think
Uh-huh.
having like a tool that could tailor my learning based on the actual problems I needed to solve in the code base would be way better than me trying to like brute force it,
Right.
or just like try to, I don't know, where does one go to learn COBOL? Watch a bunch of YouTube videos, maybe visit your university.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, I think that could be definitely interesting. Maybe another sub headline to when AI can hurt productivity is just like thinking it's going to solve every problem to the detriment of your culture.
Yeah.
And that is going to be longer term. It might take a while for you to realize that that was a wrong move, but I think this comment from Benjamin says it best of um, executives wanting every department to probe where AI could eliminate labor costs. Um, I think it's unavoidable, especially in the macroeconomic climate that we're in right now. There's a lot of pressure on being leaner and doing more with less, but
Mhm.
there is some danger there. And we might look at something that's meant to increase productivity, but it actually ends up hurting culture, well-being, hurting motivation, and those things are going to be far more detrimental down the line. So maybe that's another red flag to
Yeah, absolutely,
look out
absolutely.
for.
Trying to use AI or frankly any technology with the primary purpose of eliminating people on the team and like cutting back on your workforce, it
It's not a good look.
feels bad.
Feels
It feels
bad,
bad.
feels bad. Yeah.
And it, like you said, over the long term, it might not work out so well. But
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the things that we are seeing? I wonder if the introduction of additional AI tools is that going to decrease the amount of person-to-person communication that we have and group communication that we have. And I think that there are some fascinating impacts. And I think it's important to remember that like AI just became part of the system, and it
Mm-hmm.
will have impacts on all of the system. I don't know if you saw Forrest Brazil's newsletter a couple of weeks ago, but he was reminiscing on the first time he posted a question to Stack Overflow and sort of all of the anxiety that built up inside of him before he would post that question because he'd seen sort of how things go there. He posted the
Mm-hmm.
question and almost immediately someone came along and closed it as like, you should have researched this question better. And he just had a terrible experience. And he decided that he would never interact that way again.
Mm-hmm.
Chat comes along, you can ask that same question. The chat is always there. It's always available. It's not going
Mm-hmm.
to judge you. It's not going to tire of answering the same question over and over again. And so that fundamentally changes the comfort maybe that you have with that bot, especially when you're on a learning journey, trying to figure something new out. You can't ask it a dumb question. Or
Yeah.
even if you do, it's eager to answer you.
When you said like put the first time that you ask a question to Stack Overflow, like I felt anxious in that moment
See?
thinking about that. I think that's an interesting anecdote though, because one of the things that I think AI will be great for is like it doesn't have emotions and times uh where emotion and judgment might be clouded, or like for example responding to incidents and during outages having a companion who is like like not, not holding your hand, but like they don't tire of answering the same question over and over again. They're not going to tell you that you're stupid or that's not how computers work when everyone's emotions are like flaring up. Just to have
Right.
this like very constant sort of impartial thing that's going to just connect you with the information you need
Mhm.
quickly. I could see AI being a really helpful tool in reducing MTTR or time to recover from failed deployment, for example, just simply because it accelerates the fact finding and searching through documentations or drawing connections of things.
Yeah, but that's also, I think, another great example of where we can't expect it to replace our specialists. When you're responding to an incident, uh, you've got you've got a history with that
Mm-hmm.
application, with how that entire system works. You have intuition because you've responded to issues like this before or to other issues before. And perhaps the AI can build up some of that knowledge over time, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult to replace that responder's intuition as we're
Mm-hmm.
going through and sort of trying to resolve incidents as they come up.
So are you saying I should not replace my whole SRE team with AI?
Yeah, I think that Probably not. Probably
But I
not.
was
I think,
promised predictive metrics, and AI can predict when outages are going to happen. So
yeah, for sure. I think you still want
maybe
your SREs. I
maybe
think you
next
still want,
year.
yeah, maybe
No, I
next year,
definitely maybe
uh,
still definitely want SREs.
not next year.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a little side conversation happening in the chat here in Zoom about not having the like licensing or just legal complications of getting AI. And so there's a question about like, what about open source alternatives and
Mhm.
or even just like comparing tools to each other. I found this doesn't maybe directly address the question, but I found a study that was evaluating the quality of Copilot, Code Whisperer, ChatGPT, and I actually think some others. And there's a decent body of cited work in there that might be helpful. But there's a lot. I mean, this is a very hot area for research, so I wouldn't doubt that there's newer stuff out there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's really important. So first, on the policy level, does open source actually solve the policy problems or constraints
Mm,
within your organization? Maybe or maybe not. In fact, using open source models may just open up a
introduce more.
different set of
Yeah.
constraints, right?
Yeah.
But so I think that's fascinating. I also think that research into models and like the power and the relative strength of models, boy, models are almost like JavaScript frameworks these days, right? There's another model coming out. There are probably 5 models released since we started this webinar, right? And
Hmm.
so it's going to be very difficult to keep up. And so I think there are some countermeasures that we can put in place, though. Like as a team, we need to make sure, again, we're taking that experimental approach. But using our baseline metrics and understanding, we can then start to play with other models. Like what happens if you swap out model A for model B and give that a day? What are the impacts on how you're feeling? What is it doing for you? What are the like measurable impacts in terms of maybe code velocity, things along those lines? So being able to, as you're building applications, as you're building experiences, being able to swap out models, I think is something that we're going to have to start looking at as well.
Vendor lock-in. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm getting those vibes. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think that's actually interesting. I worked for CloudBees for quite a few years. And of course, CloudBees has their open core model, but Jenkins is an open source project. And I actually found that our customers that were just using open source, I mean, there's a ton of legal implications of using open source software and licensing and attribution. And like, I think you're right, Nathan. I don't think the legal questions reduce by using open source versus a vendor tool, just
Yeah.
based on what I've seen with other open source tools and
Yeah. And
the due diligence around them.
I guess while we're on the policy and the constraints around that question, this is maybe a good thing for leaders to look out for.
Hmm.
Maybe your organization has a policy that prevents the use of AI. How many of your developers are using it anyhow? And you don't want to know
Mm.
that for a punishment perspective, but really to show that, hey, there is something here, and maybe we need to go lean on our policy team to get a policy so that we can use these tools and stay within the bounds of policy.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. We are almost at time. Spiros, I want to address your comment. No, no one is no one's getting fired. It was a joke. Nathan's not firing any SREs. I'm not
Nope.
either. We don't recommend that you do.
No.
In fact, AI is not, I don't think AI is at the maturity level of replacing a professional human being, as we've just talked about for the last 45 minutes. But I think it's great if you have a side project as a way to get started a lot faster and do some cool stuff. Also, very good at writing poems in case that's something that you want to bring into your team meetings for a little levity. So maybe that's a good suggestion.
There you go.
Nathan, you mentioned that the 2024 DORA survey is in fact still open. Can you
Yes.
share where, like what to do, who should fill it out?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that if you are anyone working on or near a technology-enabled or technology-driven organization or team, the 2024 DORA survey is for you. This survey looks into all things, both technical but also cultural, and we have a lot of human aspects that we're investigating. This year's survey has 3 areas of focus. The first of which, no surprise, is artificial intelligence. We want to learn more about how things are going with AI today. And again, we're asking everyone around the world, so we want as many responses as possible. We're also
Mhm.
looking at the impacts of platform engineering and trying to assess what do we see around this other emerging trend. And then, of course, digging in pretty deep on developer experience. DORA, for its entire history, which is over a decade now, we've always kind of looked out into the industry to find the topics that are gaining traction, and that's how we decide where should we research. We can't, I mean, it would be poor research to not look into AI. So we're very excited to
Mhm.
see how AI is landing across the industry. And this is our second year looking into it. We're looking much deeper this year than last year. And I think that we're still going to see there's a ton of runway in terms of opportunity for AI to have impact
Yeah,
and
exciting
adoption for that
stuff.
matter. Yeah.
Also, just from me as someone based in Europe, if you are not based in the US, please fill out the DORA survey because there tends to be quite a US bias, at least in my experience. I think, Nathen, is that still true for the last years? We're
Yeah.
getting
So
more populations yeah.
last year it was very much Europe and US centric. They were pretty close to one another. But I guess another thing I should mention is that the survey itself is available in Spanish, in French, in Portuguese, in I think Japanese,
Cool. I did not know that.
and Chinese as well. Yeah. So we do make the survey multilingual. And in fact, just recently, we made the latest reports available in a number of languages as well. So trying to make the research as accessible as possible to as many people as possible.
Very cool. Dora.dev/survey, is that
There you
right?
go. That's it.
Great. Wonderful.
Dora.dev/survey. And look, the most
Nathen, oh,
important reason to take the survey, honestly, sorry to cut you off there, Laura,
all
is
good.
it gives you and your team a moment to reflect on how you're doing today. Take the survey and carefully consider each one of the questions and use that to make a plan for what you're going to do next. You don't need to wait for the report to come out. Use that survey to drive what you're going to do next week with your team.
Yeah, you got to get better at getting better. That's what DORA is
That's
all
it.
about. So, Nathen, thank you so much for the sparkling conversation and digging into some of the ways that AI might end up hurting your team and hurting productivity in the long run. Those of you who are on, we will send you a link to the recording. Those of you who are watching the recording because you couldn't make it, you already got the recording, so you've been looped in. And Nathen, we'll see each other around the internet.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Laura. Thanks
Yeah,
everyone for tuning in.
great. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.